Hey everyone, it's Tali from the AstroTwins, and I am here with Tony Howard, the founder of Astrology University. How's it going, Tony?
It's awesome, and thanks for having me, Tali.
Oh my God, it's so great to have you. We are totally starstruck by what you're doing with Astrology University. You
Oh,
have,
thank you.
yeah, I mean, you've really done so much to make astrology accessible to people who are interested through the amazing courses you teach. And I know you have a 4-year certification program now, right?
Yes, that just started up this year. It was something I've been trying to get off the ground for a couple of years, and finally pulled it together this year. And wow, it was a really exciting launch, and we have an amazing cohort of students already, and it's just been so much fun.
Oh my God, you are creating you're creating an astrology army out there. It's so
I hope so.
I mean, isn't it so amazing though how just even over the last few years, like, I think maybe Uranus and Aries helped with that from 2011 to 2018, 19, but just like, astrology is as much a part of your profile as doing your Myers-Briggs or your, a Gallup Strengths Finder or another, you got to know your whole chart now. And this is a great time and to have that information, the way you're sharing it is incredible. So thanks
Thank
for
you
all.
so much. Yeah, it's a great time to be involved because of the rise in interest in astrology, and we've definitely noticed that in terms of our student base. And we the amount of new students coming in now are so much more than they were in previous years. Like, we tended to have a pretty steady growth. We launched Astrology University in 2011, and we had pretty
Course.
steady growth. And then in 2018 and 2019, the growth was just like we just had a lot more new students coming in. So, and then the New York Times published that article that I'm sure you know about, where they talked about the amount of internet searches for astrology having doubled in the last couple of years. So it just shows that there's a rise of interest in astrology, and it's great to be involved in this and riding that wave. So
It's
really
rating a
wonderful.
place. Now, just out of curiosity, what do you attribute that to? Do you think it's anything in the stars that you can see?
I feel like it's a generational signature in part, but I also feel like it's the maturation of all of the astrology information that people like you have been creating online. And all of us just got more sophisticated with our message. And as the internet kind of grew up, we grew up too. And then we're able to just reach more people. And I think all of that stuff just kind of reached a tipping point where
Right about that.
yeah, and of course, younger generations really comfortable with the internet and accessing and looking for information. So
And learning it faster too. I mean, there's stellium in Aquarius and Capricorn
yeah,
that the younger ones have. Those young kids have.
I know. I had my first Capricorn stellium come to me when she was 23, and she sent me a list of like 12 questions in order, and she knew exactly what she wanted to ask, and they were hardcore questions. She was not messing around. And I was like, wow, this generation is going to be something to watch.
I am so, yeah, if you're born between 1988 and 1992, and then even 1994, you have a lot of Capricorn and Aquarius in your chart. And I am so impressed by that age group's like ability to just even not just be like, well, what about me? But like, what does it mean for the planet and the world?
Totally.
There's I feel hope for the planet because of them. So,
Yeah, me too. No pressure, guys, but
I know that's what I
we're
always
counting on you.
That's what I always say when I do. I'm like, I hate to tell you this, but you're gonna have to save the freaking world for us. I hope you don't mind. Well, you've written extensively for the Mountain Astrologer and in 2 Flair anthologies, Astrology: The Next Generation, speaking of which, and then the Book of Music Horoscopes. That's really cool. And then I know you have another book coming out sometime in 2020 about out of bounds planets, which I love that you're going to talk about today, because that is a new term for many of us out here. And so I'm excited to tap your wisdom on that. But I want to ask you, what is the Book of Music Horoscopes about?
Yeah, that's a compilation that Frank Clifford put together, and it's actually it's a great book. Look it up on Amazon because it's also a benefit project, and proceeds from the book directly go into a scholarship fund to help young astrology students. So it's a great project, but it's an anthology of a bunch of different amazing astrologers writing about music from all kinds of different perspectives. Aside from there being a theme about music, that's kind of where the similarities end in terms of the different pieces that each person contributed. And I actually talked about out of bounds planets in my piece. I looked at women in rock, and I did a research project looking at out of bounds planets in female rock musicians, and I wrote about that in the book.
Oh my God, I can't. This is. We'll have to Scorpio moon bond about that later on.
Yeah.
Also, on that note, what are out of bounds planets? For those who don't know, what's an out of bounds planet? Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned it being relatively new. I mean, it's a really new concept in terms of the history of astrology in general. Although we've been working with declination, which out of bounds is based on, and I'll explain what that is in just a minute. This term out of bounds was kind of coined in the 80s by a woman named Kate Baer, and her name is KT, and then Baer is like BOEHRER, in case you're trying to Google it later, and because it's not BAR, BEAR. It's a complicated spelling. But she coined the term, as far as I know, and she wrote a pamphlet about it that was popular in the 80s and 90s, but popular in kind of a niche, geeked out astrologer kind of way, right? It wasn't like a mainstream astrology book. But she got the ball rolling and the conversation started about out of bounds planets. And then from there, several folks have kind of picked up the ball on their own and done some research, including myself. I started a research project on out of bounds planets in 2011. And that's what led to.
That was a busy year for you.
It was
starting research and your own university.
I know.
Uranus and Aries. How could you stop yourself?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I tell folks I'm an implementer. I'm an idea person and an implementer, which is a blessing and a curse. I get an idea and then I start it, and then I'm like, oh wait, do I want to do that? Oh, too late.
Oh God, don't I know it? There's so many unfinished articles on my computer. Yes.
Oh yeah, I know that one.
Always come back around like a year or two later. So
Totally. Yeah, it's great though to be involved in work that we love so much and that we have so much creativity around. So I feel very blessed.
Yeah. Yeah, so out of bounds planets. What, what actually does that mean? Yeah.
Yes, so I mentioned this word declination, if you haven't heard that before. That's how we find out if a planet is out of bounds or not. We look at the measurement of declination, which is probably something you're not used to doing. It wasn't too long ago that astrologers looked at declination as even a beginning level technique. I've got a couple of books from the 50s where in the first chapter of a beginning astrology book, they mentioned declination, and now it's considered this more complicated technique.
Yeah.
But it's really just a different measurement. It's measuring latitude instead of longitude. So when you look at the horoscope wheel, what you're seeing is a measurement of longitude relative to the celestial equator, and declination measures latitude relative to the celestial equator. In other words, up and down, right? Yeah. Above and below the equator rather than left and right or side to side.
We're not just orbiting on a flat plane. We're like tilt-a-whirling too.
Exactly. Yeah? Yes. I love that. Yes. Tilt-a-whirl. Yes. And so declination is that measurement. And so when you bring in declination in addition to longitude, which you're used to looking at, you're seeing a bit more the chart in 3D. Not totally yet 3D. You have to bring in other stuff too, but you're getting towards seeing the chart in 3D, which is great. And what out of bounds is a particular set of measurements within declination, and it's really measuring the peaks. So the sun reaches a peak declination of around 23 degrees, 26 minutes in this 100-year period that we're in. Over long periods of time, that number fluctuates a teeny tiny bit, But for all intents and purposes, if you're looking at charts in this last 100 years, you're using this measurement of 23 degrees, 26 minutes by declination. And remember, we're not looking at the number of the sun in the center of your horoscope wheel. It's a totally different number. And to get that number, you just have to open up a declination grid in your astrology program. Or there are certain ephemerises that include a declination measurement. And so then you're looking for that set of numbers. And then the sun can reach that peak of 23 degrees, 26 minutes, north or south. The north or south measurement is north of the celestial equator or south. And it doesn't matter north or south, we're just measuring the two extremes. That's as high as the sun can go, 23 degrees, 26 minutes. Some of the other planets can go beyond that. And when they do, that's when we call them out of bounds.
How dare you go higher than the sun? You are out of bounds.
Yes.
I'm blowing the whistle on you.
Yes, exactly. But when planets are out of bounds, they're like, haha, good luck on that.
Exactly. I know.
Yeah, the planets that are out of bounds have a kind of freedom archetype and that's really probably relative to their position being sort of outside. We say outside the jurisdiction of the sun. But another thing I like to point out is that Saturn's peak declination is around 22 degrees and some change. It fluctuates a bit. But when a planet is out of bounds, it's not just out of reach of the sun, it's out of reach of Saturn too. And I think that might be almost more important. And it really gives us the metaphors that we use for out of bounds planets, like outside the bell curve or extreme or too much, and there's a whole bunch of other words that
is the boundary hound of the solar system. And it's interesting that the sun can go higher and lower than Saturn then.
Just a little bit, a little bit. Yeah.
Saturn's like, and then the sun is like, I'll show you, but and so I guess Saturn doesn't go out of bounds. Do all of the other planets and the moon?
Yeah. So the two planets that don't go out of bounds are Saturn and Neptune. The joke in the declination community, and I wish I knew who said this joke first. So if somebody knows and lets me know by email, I'd love to hear. Give them credit for this joke because it's a good one. But the joke is that Saturn doesn't go out of bounds because it doesn't want to, thank you. And Neptune doesn't go out of bounds because none of us could handle it.
Thank God.
So
there's a declination community too.
Yeah, there is. There's a little group of declination astro nerds out there. There used to be a special interest group with NCGR on declination. It's disbanded, but yeah, there was some interest around declination, and some folks involved in that are, I'm sure, out there still doing work. And yeah, we run into each other at conferences, basically.
Yeah, I mean, the Astro Geek community has all these subsets, and I'm sure you see it in your classes on evolutionary astrology, and which I'm going to be signing up for there. So it's
cool.
But you have so many different. Like once you find your thing, like I'm obsessed with the nodes. I love Pluto. It's like you find your thing and you form your peeps. We were talking to Yulia Simas of the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, and she has her agents, and they all have their own, it is like that. So,
nice. Yeah, it is.
Agents, yes, I love it.
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to do with our school is to introduce students to, in the four-year program, is to introduce students to a variety of techniques and styles and astrologers so they can find out where they fit in the community. Because a lot of times we'll just get into astrology through one book or one teacher or one charismatic teacher, and then we don't realize that there's this whole other there's a whole menu of different styles and techniques.
Within the school of thought. I know, it's amazing. So when planets do go out of bounds, like what happens? So I've got a little bit of a cough today. Oh,
no worries.
Yeah, what does that correlate with for each of them?
Yeah, it's it's different for each planet, and it really is relative to what we already know about the planet. So when I'm teaching this topic, what I tell students is out of bounds is really like a modifier technique. So it's kind of like a style. You can think of it as a style that the planet has in addition to what you already know about the planet. So you're still going to start out with all of your main techniques and ways of understanding a planet like Mercury, Mars, or Venus. And those are the three I really focus on, those three inner planets out of bounds. The moon goes out of bounds as well. I think you asked well, let me just explain that really quick. So all of the planets go out of bounds, but Uranus and Pluto very rarely go out of bounds, so they might not be out of bounds for years. Mercury, Venus, and Mars go out of bounds every year for a little bit, and the amount of time differs from year to year. Sometimes Mars is out of bounds for 6 weeks, and sometimes less than that. Mercury's always its out of bounds periods are pretty short, in the realm of a couple of days sometimes to maybe a week. And then Venus always goes out of bounds once a year as well, for a couple of weeks or so. And again, the periods are a bit random. But the moon is really interesting because the moon will go out of bounds during a 9-year period pretty often. And then during the next 9-year period, it will never go out of bounds. So we actually can use the moon out of bounds as a generational signature too, where we'll have a whole generation of folks where none of them have the moon out of bounds. So that's a really interesting thing too.
Oh, yeah. And so do the ones and it is kind of, I wonder how that, I mean, you've probably obsessed over this, but do you find that correlates?
Just a little.
Yeah. Just guessing, Scorpio moon and I have a Scorpio moon. I may be able to say, you're interested in something, you're interested, right? So,
yes, definitely.
But yeah, have you noticed that generationally the ones with does an out of bounds moon make you a little bit more wild and free emotionally, or does it how does that show up I'd love to go through each of the planets and kind of what do you find are some of the signatures or traits of having an out of bounds moon, or all of them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'll find some folks who equate out of bounds with weird. And that does work sometimes, but I find what works more often is extreme. If you think of what out of bounds actually is, where we're looking at planets at the peak of their declination cycle, they're really at the extreme of the cycle, right? They're at the far top or far bottom of that curve that they can be on, or that they are on. And so that works a lot. You'll find with Mars out of bounds, you get people who are first at something like Tiger Woods, who is not just first at one thing, but he's first at he was there's this whole he has a whole list of firsts.
Yeah.
He's the first black golf player to do I don't know.
PG, yeah. I mean, I'm not
so many things. He's had so many firsts, but he's also the first athlete to make as much money as he's made, and he was also the youngest golf player to do what he did when he first started winning tournaments. I apologize, I'm not a golf person, so when I usually teach on him, I have a slide with a list of all his accomplishments that I read out. I don't actually know them by heart.
don't apologize.
Yeah, but he's a great example.
Tiger Woods with out of bounds Mars. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Bjork is also somebody who has out of bounds Mars, but she's a musician who has 3 out of bounds planets. So she has Venus, Mercury, and Mars out of bounds. She's wildly creative, right? And she's definitely somebody we would describe as above the bell curve or an outlier or extreme, and we can use these out of bounds keywords like too much or over the top or unbounded, and you'll see those once you learn what those keywords are. You'll see them associated with out of bounds people as they're being described. Like if you remember, Bjork wore a swan dress to the Academy Awards, and what did people say? They said that dress is too much, right? It's over the top. Cher is somebody who has an out of bounds Venus as well, and her fashion choices get described like that as well.
Lady Gaga have a lot of out of bounds, I wonder?
Lady Gaga has Mars out of bounds. And Lady Gaga, she's famous for many, many things, and she's had so many accomplishments since the moment I'm about to describe that we don't talk about it much anymore. But she did wear a meat dress onto a stage once to make a statement. Lady Gaga with Mars out of bounds is part of a group of women who have Mars out of bounds that are in a category I call sex forward, like with Mae West, and they're women who are kind of unashamedly forward in a no-nonsense way about their sexuality, and kind of pushing the envelope there. So people with out of bounds planets are really kind of challenging the rest of us to come into a greater level acceptance for each other's unique expressions and individuality, and I think to relax our judgment on each other, really. Yeah.
Sounds like like a disruptor sort of, you know, and
it can be. It can be. You know, what's interesting is, speaking of Bjork, Brene Brown, are you familiar with her work?
Mm-hmm.
So Brene Brown was born really close to Bjork. So she also has Venus, Mercury, and Mars out of bounds. And she doesn't look anything like Bjork. She's not, you know, an innovative musician or artist. But if you really get into her work, she is an outlier in her own field. And she is somebody who kind of upsets the apple cart in her own field and in her own way. And
she interrupted kind of scientific research and brought it to our emotions.
Totally.
And,
yes.
you know, vulnerability and shame researcher probably wasn't like the hot topic around the lab until she came along. But, you know,
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's just it. Yeah. And so these people sometimes make us uncomfortable, especially if we're one of the ones holding down the status quo, but they're here to help push boundary and help the rest of us grow. Often in very creative ways. Come again?
I said I'm liking these out of bounders, and I have to run this on I got to do my own declinations.
Right.
Are you is when Mercury, Venus, and Mars go out of bounds every year, does it tend to stir up? Are those moments, like, what are there sort of things that happen in those moments, that you can see as a repeating cycle during those times?
Yeah, what's interesting is when people have out of bounds planets, I've done some research of people and artists, especially writers, musicians, actors, and film directors are the ones I mainly focus on. And when you look at somebody who has a natal out of bounds planet in their chart, and then they've contributed some great body of work, like let's say a series of books, it's not unusual to see their first book or their first entry into their whatever their field is correlating with a time when one of these planets is out of bounds, and especially the one that is most important to them. For instance, thinking about
that is interesting.
One of the existentialist writers. So the three main existentialist writers that we think about, Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Simone de Beauvoir, all three have Mercury out of bounds, which is really fascinating. And I think it's Camus.
Planet, for those who don't know.
Mercury, the writer planet. And I think pretty sure it's Camus who his first book was released while Mercury was out of bounds. But for the rest of us, I think these periods correlate with times where we can access more creativity ourselves, especially with I was about to say especially with Venus, but really it's with Mercury, Mars, and Venus all in different ways. So Mercury can help us think outside the box, for instance, right? Mars can help us take action outside the box, I guess. And Venus definitely has a correlation. Venus out of bounds has a strong relationship correlation, but it also correlates with creativity when it comes to if you are somebody who's an artist. And I'm somebody who believes that we're all creative. And although, we're all creative, but not all of us are Bjork.
Right. Oh, darn
it. But it is, I think these are Venus out of bounds times, are times when we can access that creativity. There are definitely some caveats that I could issue for all three as well. And for Mercury out of bounds, I would say sometimes when you get a wacky idea, it really is just a wacky idea. But during an out of bounds time, I think we're meant to pursue those kind of avenues, because if we open ourselves up a bit creatively, we can go into a direction that we didn't know was there. But Mercury out of bounds can sometimes get us disconnected from our heart and too much in our head. So it can be useful to to know that. These Mercury out of balance periods are very short. I mean, you're looking at a couple of days or a couple of weeks.
Really? Wow.
But it is a time where you can have a head-heart split, and people with Mercury out of balance can have that more frequently as well. Although
or intellectualizing and
yep.
losing touch with the compassion that
Yep.
be there perhaps too, huh?
Yes, definitely. And but I also want to say that that's not always a bad thing. Some folks like the existentialist writers that we so revere, I feel like sometimes we need to have that kind of imbalance to give the special gift that we have to give. So sometimes we need to get disconnected from our emotions in order to follow that train of thought all the way through without getting distracted.
Why do I even exist, and get into that, like, either that or a good strong psychedelic. I don't know. I don't know.
Right.
Who
yes,
needs
definitely.
It when you have an out of bounds planet, right?
That's right. Well, that's why we have Neptune, I guess.
Yes, stay down, Neptune.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. Especially in Pisces. Yeah. I mean,
oh my goodness.
We have Neptune in Pisces, and we have this opioid epidemic, which is
true.
Yeah, definitely a strong correlation there. But okay, Venus out of bounds. When Venus goes out of bounds by transit, which will happen in 2020 in April and May.
We're saying that Mercury, Venus, and Mars will all go out of. They're the three that are going out of bounds in 2020, right?
Yeah, definitely. And
well, for sure, because they go out of bounds every year.
Every year, yeah. And sometimes they go out of bounds all at once. That's why.
Oh, wow.
That's why Bjork has Venus, Mercury, and Mars out of bounds.
Okay. But is that pretty rare or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is very rare. And it's,
Bjork. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's never been someone like Bjork, and there probably won't be again. She's.
They broke the mold when you came out with those 3 out of bounds planets. Yeah.
Yeah, she's an original. And such a great example in so many ways of out of bounds. So I teach a lot on her chart and some of her accomplishments.
And why? Yeah.
But when Venus goes out of bounds, it's a good time to be a bit more careful in your if you're someone who's dating and your dating choices. And what I encourage people to do with Venus out of bounds is I have a lot of stories that I share when I'm teaching Venus out of bounds of folks who have really dramatic relationship stories, and they get really complicated. And one of the things that Venus out of bounds can correlate with are May-December relationships. So big age differences in relationships. And not everybody who has Venus out of bounds has those kind of attractions.
Hefner have it, I wonder.
Who's that?
Hugh Hefner, the Playboy.
Oh, you know what? I think I've looked at his chart. I think he has something else going on. The 2 people that I talk about when I'm teaching, you may not know. One is a film actress named Gloria Graham. And I don't want to tell her story because I love sharing the punchline at the end when I'm teaching it. But there's a very dramatic May-December story in her bio. And then another one is an author named Andre Gide, and he was involved with a younger fellow who was 15 years old when they got together. And so not only was there was a big age difference. He was 47. Not only was there a big age difference, but there was one that would make a lot of us uncomfortable.
Okay.
And that out of bounds people kind of, a lot of out of bounds people have that quality of making us uncomfortable a little bit. What I always say is that as long as you're causing no harm, I think it's okay. And it's okay to make us uncomfortable as long as you're causing no harm to yourself or to others. When we're in this situation, I mean, this was in 1916, totally different time in a different world. But today, most of us would feel uncomfortable with a 47-year-old man being involved with a 15-year-old young man or adolescent.
Speculatively, Michael Jackson. I wonder,
he doesn't have out of bounds planets. Yeah, something else going on with him too.
Right. But do people tend to feel like the rules don't apply to them when they have an out of bounds?
Yes.
In love or any of them? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's different than Uranus. So with Uranus, when we look at somebody who's Uranian, like maybe they have Uranus conjunct the sun, or Uranus square the moon, or Uranus on the angles, they tend to be reactive against limitations, or reactive against the status quo or the social order. They're shaking things up and breaking things down and blowing things up. And out of bounds people just feel free to do whatever they want. I'll share this quote with from Bjork, where she said, "I got called weird since the age of 4. I got used to it by 5. I made a decision then. I'd either live my life by what people thought of me and to a set of rules I didn't really know or understand, which would make me incredibly unhappy, or I could just do what I wanted. And that's a lot more fun, isn't it?"
Wow.
And she made that decision when she was 5 years old. You know, for a lot of us, that's something we finally get to at our Uranus opposition, but she was just born with that awareness. And out of bounds people tend to feel they don't quite always question their choices, which is what I was getting at with earlier, where I was the point I haven't quite made yet, which is that out of bounds people sometimes, especially with Venus and Mars out of bounds, need to be careful about choices. And I always encourage people with these out of bounds planets, especially, to have a friend who doesn't have out of bounds planets that they can kind of run their crazy ideas by.
Your wingman or wingwoman of the, to like hold it down for you, right?
Just a little bit of a check and balance, because, let's say that this Andre Gide fellow, was around today, right? And he lived in the United States, where it's not only makes us uncomfortable that he might become lovers with a 15-year-old adolescent, but it's also against the law.
Right.
So, and if he were to say to his check and balance person, do you think it's a good idea that I get involved with this 15-year-old that I'm really attracted to? And his friend would say, well, not only is it not a great idea for so many reasons, but it's also against the law, Andre. So why don't you wait at least until he's 18? That's only 3 years away, and you guys can check in with each other then. But yeah, so having some kind of person who can give you a little bit of check and balance.
Or maybe
That said,
say, oh hell no.
yes.
And
I don't know that this is just my idea for helping out folks with out of bounds planets to avoid some of the conundrums that they can get into. But I don't know if you have an out of bounds Mars, if you're going to listen if somebody tells you that. That said, Tiger Woods did seem to get the message when he made some out of bounds blunders with his Mars and his choices.
That when the scandals came out, he had his father as that cosmic wingman for many years, like strict dad managing him. I wonder what would have happened if maybe his dad, Earl, I think Woods, wasn't around, hovering around,
Hey, that's a really interesting, that's a really interesting point, because I wonder if that impacted his choices to act out behind the scenes, where he felt like he really needed that place to
true. Maybe it
express
was
himself.
And he's a Capricorn sun too, so he was to be daddy's good boy, perhaps, or had a propensity towards that. So I don't know if his father passed away or not when he acted. I don't know. I'm not going to make up a tabloid rumor there, but I think there may have been something around that, or who knows? Maybe he just couldn't. His out of bounds Mars just couldn't freaking take it anymore.
Right. Well, he did. I mean, he did express. He did apologize, and he did express, regret for his choices. So there's the Capricorn piece too.
Right.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate for people who kind of, may have not been tracking this, let's just, so when a planet is out of bounds, it means it has its declination, which is its north and south, has gone higher than the peak of the sun goes. What's the degree that the sun's maximum declination is again?
Yeah, it's 23 degrees, 26 minutes. So I can show you this on a declination grid. That might be
that'd be great.
Easy. So I've got Bjork's chart right here. So right over here on the right.
Bjork, this is her chart.
Yeah, so if we look to the right of the wheel, there's a little box here, and the box has DECL at the top.
Ah.
And that is your declination grid. This is run in the Sirius Astrology program. You can find this in SolarFire. You can even find it online on astro.com.
Oh, cool. Right.
It's in the extended chart selection on astro.com if that's what you're using. And but again, you're not looking at any of the numbers inside the wheel. So with Bjork's chart, for instance, we're not looking at her Mercury being at 18 Sag or her Mars at 5 Capricorn or 15 Capricorn. We're looking at these numbers over here where we see Mercury has a declination of 25 South 01. Her Venus has a declination of 25 South 46. And her Mars has a declination of 24 South 31. It doesn't matter north or south. You're just looking at a number that's higher than 23 degrees, 26 minutes. Wow. So all three of those are much higher.
Okay. So there we go. And how about what happens if someone has Jupiter out of bounds? Does that are they like super world, never on the same continent for longer than a week kind of person? You know? That's a star?
Definitely. That's a great question. I haven't explored Jupiter out of bounds in birth charts at length yet. It's on my list to do before I finish my book. And Jupiter doesn't go out of bounds very often, and it doesn't go very far out of bounds. So it only barely goes out of bounds. The first thing I noticed correlating with was actually a mundane correlation where I've seen Jupiter out of bounds in the charts for some court cases where we're really dumbfounded by the judge's determination.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, so controversial court cases definitely correlate.
Is no longer relevant here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Jupiter is the lawmaker too, so that would make a lot of sense. And
somebody believing, that their version of justice is right, contrary to what the majority is telling them.
I see. Okay, that would make that. And Uranus and Pluto out of bounds. What is that? Also kind of rare then, or?
It's very rare. There's a whole generation of folks that have it. The chart I'm most familiar with that I use to talk about that a little bit is David Lynch. I don't know if you know him as a director.
Twin Peaks and.
Yep, Twin Peaks, exactly. Yep.
Yep.
Blue Velvet. Yeah, he's definitely an odd bird.
Another Capricorn too, I believe. Sun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And his films get very there's a violence and a darkness to them that's pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Although it doesn't always correlate with this, but if you just think about extremes in terms of whatever that planet represents.
Pushes it past it a little bit more.
Pushes it past it a little bit more. So during World War II, Pluto was out of bounds for most of that time when the Nazi persecutions took a very dark turn. They had already been pretty dark, like they had work camps, but at some point the work camps started doing even, worse things that we all know about at this point. And that was when Pluto was out of bounds, that whole period.
These historical periods, those moments in time. Is there anything out of bounds? Let's talk about those periods of time in 2020, unless there's anything else on Bjork you wanted to show us.
Oh gosh, I could talk about Bjork forever, but yeah, I just wanted to show you how the declination grid worked, and that you have to look outside the birth wheel to find the numbers, because the rookie mistake that people make is after they hear me talk about out of bounds planets is they'll look in their chart and they'll say, oh, my Jupiter's at 29 Gemini, so my Jupiter's out of bounds. And that's not the number that you're looking for. You're looking for, like in the declination grid, Bjork's Jupiter is 23 degrees north 00. So it's a totally different number. And her Jupiter is, of course, not out of bounds.
29 degrees is 29 degrees around the Gemini part of the sky. For those who haven't looked at charts too much, you can see that little peach wheel segment there is the Gemini. And so it'll go from 0 to 29, which is the 30 degrees that represent Gemini. So that's, but this is the up and down, the tilt-a-wheel world, basketball, dribbling, bouncing, kind of. I don't know. How many more metaphors can we make?
I love the tilt-a-whirl because Yeah, we're on a globe that's tilted and wobbling in space, you know. So here we are.
I'm really like wanting to go back to Michigan where I grew up and go to the state fair right now and experience the out of bounds. But
Right. Oh, I'm from Central Illinois, so Midwest people.
oh,
Yeah.
cool. Hey, we love to start schools, don't we? You know,
Yeah.
what else? What else? That's why we're such implementers. You know, it's like, well, what else were we gonna do? There was, at least for me, I know there was no internet until I got to college, so we just had
Right.
to make stuff up as we went. You know.
Yep. Me too. Me too. We had the internet in college.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know it was actually I'm kind of grateful for that because I think that definitely made me a lot more productive, even though here we are using the internet as a tool for all of that. But you know, having to just like make your own fun because you can walk out, I don't know. No
Yeah.
offense to
I mean,
the
we
Midwest, but
we
you
would be out at night. Like I don't know about you, but in the Midwest, we would play hide and seek until like 9 p.m. outside and
know, oh yeah.
made up all kinds of games. And we were always outside just playing
Oh,
with each.
totally. Softball in the middle of the street, like frisbee, yeah, tag. Too bad we weren't neighbors. We would have had fun.
I know, right? Yes.
Tony, come over. I can stay out till 9, you know?
Definitely.
I love it. I love it. Oh my God. So tell us about
Yeah.
2020, actually was let's talk about 2019 for a minute. Was there anything particularly out of bounds besides the usual suspects of Mercury, Venus, and Mars this past year?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I was paying attention to because I've kind of tracked Mars out of bounds in the last 100 years or so, and it does correlate with some moments in politics where, um, things happen. Like Mars was out of bounds when 9/11 happened. Mars was out of bounds when JFK was assassinated, and some of these key moments in U.S. history. A lot of them, like more than you would think, correlate with Mars out of bounds. So I was curious because Donald Trump has Mercury out of bounds in his chart, and his Mercury is in Cancer, and it's also square Neptune. So he believes his own lies, which is something that we already know, but that really correlates with that signature. He has a very subjective view of reality, and he believes what he thinks. He really is outside the box in that way.
And everyone like, how can he say that is like one probably, how could he say and tweet and how, okay, everybody now Donald Trump solved
Right?
Mercury out of
Mercury
bounds.
out of
That
bounds.
really does explain a hell of a lot. I
It
gotta say.
yeah. That when I saw that, I was like, well, astrology works, and it keeps working.
I mean, if there's anyone I would have thought, Mercury,
Right?
that sounds like a Mercury out of bounds. Like he really is.
Yeah.
Hello, my picture here, or there for
Yeah.
that. Huh.
Well, before we bash people with Mercury out of bounds, I have a whole slew of really amazing Mercury out of bounds people. So you don't have to make Donald Trump's choices if you have Mercury out of bounds.
Right. There's always,
Yeah.
the ones to admire and the ones
Yep.
with the cautionary tale. Or
Yeah.
some people actually do admire him and think that
Sure.
he tells it like it is, and I'm so glad. So
Right.
it's all subjective there.
Yeah, in my opinion, he tells it like it isn't, but that's the Mercury out of bounds. So I was watching him during Mars out of bounds this year because when Mars was out of bounds, it was directly impacting his natal chart. And what's interesting watching him is that every week he says something that can correlate with something. He's up to new antics every week, so there's always something going on. I don't know that more went on with Mars out of bounds, but he did kind of take a turn with the immigration, with his immigration policies, and the things he was saying were definitely out there in a way that most of us would feel uncomfortable. Most of us are uncomfortable keeping children separated from their parents in cages, and Republicans and Democrats we're all uncomfortable with that if we have a heart. Or if we know anything about parenting, where the separation from those children, and it causes great trauma, and those kids are a lot of those kids are going to be traumatized for the rest of their life. So him, when Mars is out of bounds and you're making those kinds of choices, sometimes you get an out there idea or an extreme idea, and it really is too much. I had a friend. Here's a little cautionary tale for Mars out of bounds, and this is for somebody who did not have natal Mars out of bounds. But she got an idea to sell the family's house and sell other stuff and move into an RV and do some traveling around the United States, which sounds fun to some people. And it sounded like a cool idea, but she's an implementer too. So she got the idea and she started doing it. And this was all while Mars was out of bounds. She actually sold a bunch of their stuff. And then she took a test trip with her family, loaded everybody up, and did a road trip and stayed in a really small space for about a week in another city. And during that time, she was like, that was enough of that to be in that confined space with my family for 6 days. So I definitely know I don't want to just always be living in an RV. And that realization came after Mars came back inbounds. And she basically literally said to me, "What was I thinking?"
Had she sold her house or just?
No, she didn't get that far, luckily.
Okay.
But she had sold a lot of their stuff, and so they had to start, getting stuff again. But she didn't sell so much that they still had beds to sleep on. But their house was pretty stark, and she's like, "I'm kind of liking the Zen vibe, and I like being able to."
Marie Kondo would be
yes, Marie Kondo would have been
bound to push for that Con Marie mission sometimes,
Yeah. So what I say is if you get a crazy idea, what seems like a crazy idea during Mars out of bounds, hang out. Mars out of bounds isn't that long. Wait until it goes back in bounds and see if you still like that idea.
How long is it usually? A couple weeks or?
Sometimes it's a couple of weeks. Sometimes it's 6 weeks. So it can be longer. You can actually check for those of you who know what an ephemeris is. There's a Swiss ephemeris online. If you just type in Swiss ephemeris, you can view pages of the Swiss ephemeris for hundreds of years.
I love it. Yep.
And there's you look for the one that includes declination, and you can see on there the exact dates of when Mercury, Venus, and Mars are out of bounds.
What I'm going to be doing after this call.
Yeah.
Astro.com, they're the best.
Yeah, totally.
Good, amazing tools.
Such a resource. Thank you so much to those folks for putting that together.
They give it all away for free. I'm like, I don't know what your revenue model is, but
they make a very healthy income from the reports that they sell. So
well deserved. They give a lot away for free, and okay. So good. Yeah, I was like, how do they do this? I've got people.
Yeah.
Loaded up in here. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they definitely, they sell the reports through the website, and they're classic reports with Liz Green and Rob Hand. So
amazing. Yeah, totally. Two of my hero astrologers for sure.
Yeah.
So we got, you said February, right? Mars.
Yeah. So Mars is going to be out of bounds around February 13th to 28th.
Valentine's Day should be quite spice. Get the swan dress, honey.
Yes, definitely. It's also remember Mars is sex forward, so
that's right.
It could be a saucy Valentine's Day.
Totally, but who needs Mae West? The best way to get over one man is under another, she said.
Yes.
Sex forward Valentine's Day.
Exactly.
Conversation hearts printed now.
Right? Yeah. So this one's short, 2 weeks. It's really close to the Saturn-Pluto business in January. I wouldn't be surprised to see some political shenanigans during that time as well.
Be an assassination attempt. I don't know. Things like that. Anything. You said JFK had a.
It did. It definitely correlated with JFK's assassination. But it can be.
I mean, not that I'm trying to.
No.
Universe, I wasn't putting that. I don't wish that upon anyone.
But another correlation with Mars out of bounds is going rogue, and we think about what that means. That's basically like the example that I usually use is this fellow from the Civil War who basically he asked permission to go rogue actually. but where he would be, it was Sherman, General Sherman. He's a controversial figure, and the controversy is definitely the out of bounds piece. He had Mars out of bounds, but he led a mission where he was kind of out of touch and out of contact with his superiors, so that he could do whatever he wanted. That has that out of bounds quality where we're kind of going rogue. We're going out on our own. We're kind of like saying, F the authorities. I'm going to do whatever I want. And so it can be a time period where you kind of bust out in some way. And there are so many Mars out of bounds people who have done really amazing work because of that I don't want to even say that's a bad thing. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Breaking free, but for the whole going rogue, I mean, with the impeachment in the House and the Senate trial coming up here potentially, like, I so wonder if that'll wind up timed with that, and you could see a whole going rogue to as if it hasn't already happened, but yet another round of going rogue in the White House, or even on the other
because one of the things they're talking about with the Senate is not even taking up the not even taking up the impeachment and doing a trial. So
its own version of Mitch McConnell could be going rogue at that time, being a Pisces. I think his birthday is right around there too, at the end of February. So, or I don't know if it's we could. Yeah, that is okay. We will be we'll be watching to see. And then Venus, when is Venus's 2020 out of bounds phase?
Venus is out of bounds right before and during when it goes retrograde. So it's out of bounds in April and May, and Venus goes retrograde May 13th. Comes back in bounds at the end of May, but stays retrograde until June 24th. So that first 2 weeks of May, I think, is going to be pretty wonky with Venus. Where
out of bounds and retrograde for the first 2 weeks of May, huh?
Yeah. So that's
Gemini.
The first thing I thought of is you're remembering that ex that you broke up with, and you're like, why did we break up? He's so cute. And then you rekindle things, and then you're like, you remember, oh, this is why we broke up.
Right. But not before there's a trail of regret strewn across your autobiography, right?
Right. Yes, definitely. Okay. But sometimes we rekindle things with people from our past because we have unfinished business with them. So I don't even discourage people from, taking those kind of actions, because you never know. If you're drawn to do something and it's in your heart, then there's probably a reason for it. So
and maybe there could be some cool creative, collaborations, some reunion tours with Venus, will Destiny's Child get back together again? I don't know.
I love it. That would be really cool, right?
Yeah. Something, or some, dynamic duo, going down in flames, but giving it one last go,
know? Yeah, it could happen. And that's a long period. Venus is going to be out of bounds longer than Mars this year. Last year it was the opposite, I think. And and then Mercury's out of bounds for short periods at the beginning of the year. So during New Year's, Mercury's going to be out of bounds, and through around January 9th. And I don't have the exact dates. Also, again, at the end of May, beginning of June, and then at the end of December. So we're going to have a Mercury out of bounds Christmas again next year too.
Oh, wow. Have yourself a Mercury out of bounds Christmas.
Yeah.
So we're having one now. So, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It looks like it's going to go. I have to actually get my,
we're recording pre-2020, everyone. So,
and I know that Mercury is out of bounds on Christmas. I just don't know if it goes out of bounds before Christmas. But we can
trine Uranus that day, and Mercury out of bounds. The conversations around the tree are going to get really, really interesting. Maybe don't talk about politics this year, or
I just always recommend that with families, right?
Kind of as a rule, right?
I was just talking with a group of people last night about those family situations where people have different views on things, and things get heated really quickly, and it's just often better to just agree not to talk about those certain subjects so that you can enjoy your time together.
Totally. Yeah. And even more so when an out of bounds Mercury is happening. So we've got some, yeah, I mean, it doesn't, again, people are probably like, oh my God, should I be worried if there's an out of bounds planet? It doesn't sound like, of course you should maybe be alert, but it sounds like it could be a really amazing thing, especially for those who are boxed in to like break out and have like, maybe speak up for yourself, one of our, or
I love it.
yeah, just kind of maybe that's the time where you say enough, or you set a boundary, or so I could see that being very beneficial too, especially sometimes in families over the holidays, we think we have to just like please everyone, or and it's like, hey, try saying no for a change,
right? Yeah, definitely. And out of bounds times with all of the planets can be times where you you come up with solutions to problems that you didn't have access before. So just new ways of thinking of things, new ways of seeing things, new ways of experiencing things that open things up for you in a way that you didn't anticipate. And that can be a very good thing.
It's a lot like a retrograde. People tend to fear a retrograde planet, but that just gives us a chance to review. Sometimes, okay, it's not fun to have to go back and, reread things that you wish were done, but like, sounds like you get a chance to go deeper. Do you find if I don't even know if this is too much geeking out, but here, see, now I'm joining the declination community. If it's a south declination, do people tend to go deep into the shadows, and north, do they go like, like ascended kind of thinking? Do you find that to happen?
So there are people who, there's one of the only books on declination is a book by Paul Newman called Declination in Astrology. I have it handy right here on my desk. But he teaches, like some of the other declination people, that there is a difference between south and north. I haven't been able to corroborate that in my research. What they say is that south is a bit more internal, north is a bit more external. I think Bjork's chart is a great example where her 3 out of bounds planets are all south. And although she might go inside to create her artwork, she's not, she lives her life very much externally and in the public and with her creativity. And even when she's sharing the creativity in one of her albums, she did a tour where she wasn't only sharing the music, but she was teaching musicology concepts by using the album in classes with kids. So definitely putting herself out there and not just working on her own and her music as a hermit, So
yeah,
I don't know that the south and north thing fits, or maybe it correlates with something we haven't noticed yet.
Yeah. Well, the research will go on, right?
Yeah.
So this is so cool, Tony. Thank you so much. Do you have any kind of little final words of sort, or big final words for people about 2020? Anything that you've got your eye on in particular in the year ahead, or?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've had a bunch of other astrologers talking about some of the main configurations. Yeah. I'll just say that I, for one, am very excited about the Jupiter-Saturn grand conjunction in Aquarius, because this is the start of a new 200-year cycle. It's going to usher in a whole new energetic dynamic that that we haven't been experiencing. So it's really going to be a change in the energetic. And I think we could all agree that we're ready for that, no matter what side of politics we're on or anything. I think we're all ready for something to shift. And
yes.
Because it's the start of a 200-year cycle, I don't think that things are just going to magically be better right then. It's the beginning, but I'm excited for the beginning to come.
I'm excited for that too. That's going to be on the winter solstice, everybody, of 2020. Jupiter and Saturn are meeting up at 0 degrees, 29 minutes Aquarius. And this is they meet up every 20 years, and they met up in an air sign once in 1980.
That was our preview, yeah.
Yeah, but they've been in Earth signs for 200. I talked about this a bit with Patrick Watson and Stephanie Gailing, and I know my sister may have touched on it a little bit, but the grand conjunction. So yeah, that's the next 200 years of grand conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn will all be in air signs, right?
Yep.
And so new schools of thought coming in, and yeah.
bringing in more of that air energy where it's been a real earth energy focus. And yeah, the one thing that weirds me out a little bit is to think about it as a new information age, because I'm like thinking, how could it get more than it is now?
I know. I'm like, I'm gonna have to come back for another lifetime to understand that. You know.
Yeah, yeah,
But nothing like air to push us further out of bounds, just metaphorically speaking.
yep,
Too.
yep.
It's going to be really exciting to see. So, or maybe terrifying in moments too. But
Sure.
we'll bring it all. We'll bring it all back together. Well, I can't wait for your book to come out on
Thank you.
Out of Bounds Planets. And if you guys want to check out more from Tony, go to astrologyuniversity.com. It is chock full of amazing classes. I know some of you are watching through Tony's portal here, but many of you will not be. And it was just such our honor and pleasure to get to introduce you and your school and your work to any new astrologers out there. If you guys didn't hear in the beginning, he has a 4-year certification program. So if you are ready to take your astro obsession to a serious next level, now, just like in, the Renaissance days, you can actually be accredited at a university. I love it, right?
Well, we're not technically accredited, but we are definitely, because they won't accredit a University of Astrology right now in the United States.
They will, though, I think.
I think they will too.
Yeah,
I really do.
Okay, I'm sorry for misspeaking, but in my mind, it's an accreditation, and so you can hang out. Galileo would say it is, right?
That's right.
And all those.
Totally, yeah. I mean, we're definitely, it's a certification in that we're assigning homework and reading assignments and writing assignments, and we're grading your homework and evaluating your progress over time, so that by the time you graduate from our program, we really know your work, and you're going to feel confident reading charts. And so when we give you our stamp of approval at the end, it really is going to mean something. It might not mean something to Harvard, but it will mean something to us. And to you too.
And the millions of people who are becoming more and more fascinated, and maybe getting their chart on CoStar or another app, and then going, okay, wait, I want to know more than this. So this is a great place to go. And just, I know I could study this for the rest of my life and not learn everything there is to know. And
so true.
New schools of thought will likely emerge with these grand conjunctions. I think the grand conjunctions and air signs are going to be really good for astrology too.
Totally.
So, well, cheers to that. Have an amazing 2020, and I hope I get to run into you at one of the conferences this year. So.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks so much for having me. It's been just such a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope we run into each other soon.
I do too. All right, thanks, Tony. Bye.
Bye for now.